This is Larry Jordan, the host of the Digital Production Buzz. The following interview is an excerpt from a recent program. To hear the entire program, visit digitalproductionbuzz.com. Simon Walker is a UK-based trainer, an Adobe Certified Expert and Instructor, an Apple Certified Master Trainer in Final Cut Studio, and a Certified Trainer for Final Cut Pro 10. What he doesn't know, the rest of us don't need to learn. Hello, Simon. Welcome back. It's good to have you with us.
Hi, Larry.
Simon, last week at IBC, you were presenting for Adobe in their booth. Give us the details of their forthcoming upgrade.
Well, I was working, I wasn't on the main stage. I was working with them on one of the pods and talking to customers about some of their new releases and things like that. And it's quite interesting, I think, what they've got going on, cross-referenced with what I've been unofficially calling the interconnectedness of all things, which is a Douglas Adams quote, of course. But it's interesting that Adobe are supporting HDR in their new release. When you cross-reference that with some of the other things that are happening, things that Sony are doing, and also card manufacturers like Bluefish are doing to support actually having the ability to see HDR on the screens. So it's quite interesting wandering around all the different stands or booths at IBC and then kind of doing a tea leaf reading, or it's a massive big technical jigsaw puzzle to actually bring these together. So I'm happy to talk more specifically rather than that general overview, if you like.
There's two things I want to cover. One is I'd love to get a sense of what the specific features are, but then I want to explore this whole concept of interconnectedness with you. But let's talk about what the new goodies are in the upcoming release, which Adobe previewed, but which has not yet been released.
Well, the big one was HDR. And support for those formats in and out. And they also have lots of small things like the video limiter now exists as an effect in the video panel, so you can apply it at the last minute if you're doing a quick turnaround. Although caveat, and I've written a blog post about this, always better to grade your stuff first. This is just a get out of jail free card, if you like.
Wait, hold it a second. They've had a broadcast safe filter for a while. Is this a replacement for the broadcast safe filter?
Well, they removed the broadcast colors effect in the 2015 version, and they've still got the video limiter, which is the Mercury Playback accelerated filter. And so if you put that through its paces under specific settings, that's pretty good, actually. But they've added that, the same one, to the export tab for video on the export from Premiere Pro. So it's just one of those small little extras that can help you when you're on the deadline or doing things at 100 miles an hour.
I was thinking about it. HDR is a huge feature because so far Apple and Avid don't support HDR, and Adobe will be supporting it when the product gets released, which reminds me that there's really two types of features, those that get the most publicity and those that are the most helpful to editors in their workflow. Of the major features, what are you most excited about? And then I'm going to ask you, what are the minor features that get you the most interested?
Sure. Okay. The major one was HDR, and I got very excited because I was able to play with it with one of the new Sony monitors, the BVM X300, and Sony were also demonstrating those on their stand too. So I was playing with it on the Bluefish stand and using their Epoch and their Neutron cards to actually physically change the display. And I have to say, it's not until you see these things in the flesh that you really appreciate the experience that is looking at these bright HDR images, especially when you're looking them side by side with an SDR and HDR image. And they are undoubtedly beautiful to look at, wonderfully saturated, but I can't imagine sitting in a dark editing suite for more than about half an hour without needing a break or turning on the light because they are just so bright. And the joke was that we were going to have to put our shades on to watch these. And then the joke extended to be the fact that 3D didn't take on because people had to wear glasses to watch it. And then suddenly you got HDR. Well, you might have to wear glasses with that. Ba-boom.
But let me come back at you with that, because I've heard this comment that HDR is really bright, because it is, compared to standard dynamic range video. By the way, HDR, for those that don't know the acronym, stands for high dynamic range video, where the highlights are brighter and the shadows are darker than traditional video. But the reason that we watch video in darkened rooms is that standard dynamic range video is just dark, which is why we watch movies in darkened rooms. It's just a really, really dim experience. Maybe what we're doing is more emulating real life, where we don't have to walk around in dark rooms to have conversations with people.
Absolutely, and that's something I was talking about with a couple of editors when we were standing in front of the screen, where we were saying this is going to be much easier for edit suites that weren't specifically dark. And I've been in so many edit suites that have been in open plan offices because of budgetary reasons or other reasons. So it's going to be very interesting seeing the uptake of this, because you're absolutely right, you don't have to be in a dark room. And also, we were talking about how it might change the editing process, because if you're an editor and you're going to be tempted to cut from a really dark or a night shot into a bright shot, that's going to really wake up the audience. And you could use this for good or ill, so it's up to you as an editor, I suppose.
I'm reminded of stun lights at a heavy metal concert, where all of a sudden the front wall lights up and people's eyes are nailed to the back of the concert hall.
Yes, it's exactly that experience. And also, at the Colorist Mixer party, we were joking. In fact, Warren Eagles, he's co-founder of the International Colorist Academy, and he was joking with everybody that, yes, you're going to have to do an HDR version and an SDR version, and the joke was for the same money, just because the saturation is so difficult on them, or so different between the two versions. And we're so used to, as you say, slightly dimmer images, and the saturation isn't as saturated, isn't as bright, and it doesn't grab you as much. So that'll be interesting. But there's one more point, that is, if you're looking at a 4K image side by side with an HDR image, the same spec, the same feed, the same codec, it's just so much sharper watching the HDR image, which, as I understand it, is to do with the fact of the way our eyes process light, and the brighter it is, the more sharp it seems to us. So there's something interesting watching two 4K images side by side and just seeing one visibly like 30 or 40% sharper. So that's going to have an aspect as well, especially on outdoor big display screens.
Well, let's get back to the announcements that Adobe made, and a comment that you made earlier about interconnectedness. Now, one of the things that I remember reading about you writing is the interconnectedness between technology companies that are working to try to make the connections of all this different gear more seamless. How can it be more seamless than it already is? If we plug in hard disks, they show up on our desktop, and software knows how to save files. What's the missing component that you're starting to see?
Well, interesting. I do have a comment on plugging stuff in, but interesting you should mention that about the human interface. I've been working on a Dell laptop side by side with my old MacBook Pro, and it's the M3800, and it's the one with the touch screen. The reason for this is that I've been testing out the new touch interface that Premiere Pro has got. And I have to say, after many years of advising editors about working more quickly, using keyboard shortcuts and the mouse in a more efficient way, I found that physically touching stuff on the screen is so much faster. So much so, I've been going back to the MacBook Pro and trying to touch the screen, forgetting that it's not a touch screen. And so it's really interesting. It's so much faster to be able to go and press something on the screen rather than collect your mouse on the trackpad and then go and click something. And I thought originally it wasn't necessarily going to be as ergonomic as it is, because you're lifting up your arm to press the screen. But actually, it's very natural, and I can't imagine not doing it anymore. So another reason why I've been hopping in between Windows and Mac is that so many editors I know are switching over to Windows, especially in large facilities. So I have to jump in between both operating systems. But I have to say, given the money, if I had to buy a new laptop, I would be seriously tempted to switch to Windows. I know that's heresy, but anyway.
Well, I was just thinking it's going to change the pizza eating habits of a lot of editors if touch catches on like this.
Absolutely. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's actually a good thing. It's going to be a good discipline in the edit suite. Rather, okay, you can't have crisps, at least not until you finish that edit. Maybe that's a reward system for editors.
Do I remember reading correctly that the World Cup was using some of these touch features?
We didn't use touch at the World Cup. We certainly used Windows. And poor me, I was stuck in Rio for 6 to 8 weeks, Copacabana and so on.
I'm so sorry.
For the World Cup. I know. It's all right. Don't worry. I'll be okay. I'll get over it.
Tell me about what you learned at the World Cup.
I will tell you about that, but can I just go back to your interconnectedness of things? Because there was something else that I saw at IBC.
It's your interview. You just take control. Run this however you want.
The other thing that I thought was quite interesting was Thunderbolt plugging into both Mac and Windows. New Dell laptop I've got has got Thunderbolt on it. You have to download the drivers for it. But I have my Mac formatted disks plugged in to my PC laptop. And I've done a series of tests with things like Mac Drive and Paragon's HFS Plus for Windows, and seeing which is faster. By the way, the Paragon software seems to me to be about 20 or 30% faster, because I'm getting almost 320 megabytes a second of the Thunderbolt connection from my SSD. But in any case, what I thought was really interesting was the fact that through Thunderbolt, you can do, like Bluefish have got an external chassis, I think it's a Magma chassis, where they've got graphics cards plugged into an external chassis that will work with a Mac Pro via Thunderbolt. And you've got the guys over at G Technology have made a Minimag reader for red cards, and that plugs into the G-Dock, and that plugs in via Thunderbolt. So it's very interesting. The higher dynamic range footage requires faster speed, but at the same time, you've got all these companies doing small little connectivity things so that you can actually transfer stuff between computers or between drives and backups or RAIDs, and not have to worry about which particular platform you're on as much as we used to. So that's what I mean by the interconnectedness. It's not as if every manufacturer is working together to make an editor's life easy. I know they're in business to sell stuff too. But it's quite interesting how they kind of seem to be settling upon things that are really helpful and overlapping about helping you not have to consider so much of the technical aspect. And that isn't such a barrier to editing. At least that was my impression over last week at IBC.
If you were to pick the top 3 highlights that did not involve Adobe from IBC, clearly HDR would be one. What would be the other 2?
The second one would be Thunderbolt on Mac and PC, and how that's being rolled out quite significantly everywhere. And the third one would be a nice tiny little gadget, again from G Technology, that is a FireWire adapter. So you can plug it in the back of your USB 3 drives that they do, their EV series drives, and then you can daisy chain FireWire drives off the back of it.
A connector for FireWire that goes to USB, not Thunderbolt.
The USBs off the back of the USBs, when you plug them into the dock, they plug it in via I forgot what it's called now. It's that special adapter that usually you have to have that plugs into the back of the machine. It's usually on the inside. The word's gone from me, but you plug it into the back of the drive, and it converts it into a FireWire. So FireWire 800. I'm sure you have as well. I've got a large plastic bucket of about 30 drives that I've used over the last 10 years or so, most of which have been FireWire. And I don't have a FireWire port on my new laptop, so it's quite interesting to be able to piggy these back or daisy chain them back off each other.
That is very cool.
I know, they only just introduced it, and so I've been testing out how many I can daisy chain and how many powered drives versus self-powered or bus-powered. So just that small thing to be able to access old drives I found pretty useful.
Simon, normally at this point in the interview, I ask what new projects you're working on, but I know what your next project is, and I also know you're under NDR, so instead I'm going to say that we need to have you come back and talk about this when it's done, because it is very cool when you're finished. Where can people go on the web, keep track of what you're doing?
Oh, well, thank you, Larry. People can go to my website, which is www.simonwalkerfreelance.com, or via Twitter, which is just @SimonWalker. And if you type in Simon Walker on LinkedIn, you can always find me as well.
And the voice you've been listening to is Simon Walker, a freelance trainer and media maven based out of the UK. His website is simonwalkerfreelance.com. And Simon, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Larry. It's a pleasure.
If you'd like to see more videos like this one, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. To stay connected and receive updates from The Buzz, sign up for our free weekly newsletter now. Or you can learn more about us on our website. And thanks for watching The Digital Production Buzz.